Hey everyone, and welcome to the Soul Star Cafe. My name is Ruth Perkinson, and I'm really happy all of you are here with me today. I have a very dear friend with me by the name of Tom Coates. Hello, Tom.
Hello.
And here comes his
My
cat to
cat
make
is
it. The cat is making an appearance, a little
right,
cameo
right.
by his cat. Welcome to the channel, and I'm really excited that you're here with us today because I met you years and years and years ago through my study, actually, of A Course in Miracles. I was going to a Unitarian church, and there were several people there that mentioned you and your IONS group here locally in Richmond, Virginia. And
Hmm.
so I was heavily guided to come see some of those speakers back 10, 12 years ago. And
Right,
that's where I first met you. And then I think we got a little closer maybe 5 or 6 years ago through just our mutual love of metaphysics
right.
and intuition and consciousness. So thank you so much for being here and bringing about these stories, these events that have happened in your life that have really been so soulfully and spiritually healing. And so I really appreciate your dedication to that work and also all the beautiful legal work you've done here locally in Richmond for the last many years. Really appreciate that as well.
Well, thank you. Delight to be here.
Yeah. So let's get started, I guess, with you and the journeys. You've had multiple journeys of just healing, I feel. And you sent me a really beautiful narrative recently that my beautiful wife Heather read to me the other day
Mm.
about an extraordinary journey to Krakow many years ago,
Right.
back in the mid 90s with your wife Christina and your daughter Victoria.
Hmm.
And it really, really, it's a very timely story, and I thought we could touch on that for a bit and start there if you like, and or really
Sure.
anywhere else you might want to begin.
Okay. Well, yeah, as you know from our years of association, I've been one who has been blessed or cursed, as the case may be. Mostly, I felt like it was a blessing to have been the subject of many, many uh, non-ordinary or paranormal or anomalous experiences, as however they may be called, and in a way that the psychologist at University of Connecticut, Ken Ring, uh, in his book series, a couple of books back in the '80s, uh, one called "Heading Towards Omega" and the other one called "The Omega Project." Uh, he dubbed people that have these things as experiencers, as a in the same way that Raymond Moody created and coined the term near-death experience. Um, uh, Ken Ring created the term experiencer for somebody that would have a more than usual number of non-ordinary experiences in their lives. In my case, they started when the first I remember at least was when I was 3 years old, and they continued from there. And I had um, voices in my head, that later identified themselves to me as my spirit guides, and I had the wisdom not to share this with my psychiatrist father or my schizophrenic mother, otherwise, lest they think I might be crazy. And so, um, because I felt like I was not, and but they wouldn't have had any other frame of reference for the kinds of experiences I was having. And so, anyway, I went, I kept all this completely close to the vest until I was until I was the first person I shared any of it with was Bob Monroe in the 1930s. In the 1970s.
Yeah.
Um, and I met him when he was buying the property that became the site of the Monroe Institute in Nelson County, Virginia. And uh, I was representing the person who sold him the property. It was an 850-acre farm property up there. And and so knowing his history, I knew he was a safe audience to with whom I could share my own out of body experiences and that sort of thing. Anyway, so I've had many a great variety of different types of experiences, including a lot of spontaneous. past life experiences, and and the one to which you made reference was one that I encountered on my first trip to Poland with my late wife Christina and our child who was then about 18 months old, uh, and it was in the spring of 1994. And my wife she passed away in 2012, cancer, but she had been an emigre from Poland in 1980 or 81 and come over to the United States on a postdoctoral fellowship at the Medical College of Virginia, uh, now at VCU Hospital, and in the and she was in the field of nephrology and so forth. And so she was she and I got together in 1992 for the first time, and then she took me over there to meet her family and so forth in the spring of '94, and um, and and the this experience occurred while we were on a train ride from Warsaw to Krakow. Her family was from what is the Poles call Gdansk, the not the Germans before that called it Danzig, and until the end of World War II, Danzig was a almost entirely German city, but the Germans evacuated at the end of the war, and it became a Polish city. It had been around since 900 and some AD, and actually it had been built by the Dutch because it's a city that's in a lowland area, and they brought in a bunch of people from Amsterdam to help them build dikes and so forth to drain, as we've heard in more recent times in the United States, drain the swamp.
Right.
The political context we've heard it here, not in the actual context. But It's an interesting city because all the old architecture is Dutch. When you're in the main square down in the downtown area, you feel like you might be in Amsterdam. The architecture is almost identical to what you see in Amsterdam. Um, and so anyway, we went over there and and spent a few days in Amsterdam. I mean, in Gdansk, and then she was going to take me on a tour of some areas around the country. And so we were going to go first to the old capital of Poland, which is Krakow. And the geography of Poland is relatively the way the current borders are is on the eastern border is Ukraine, at least to the southern half of the eastern border, and on the western border is Germany, and the Germans and the Poles have had sort of a symbiotic relationship for about 1,000 years. In my experience, now this is my impression as an American who had some knowledge of history. It appeared to me that they got along very well in this sort of symbiotic way. That the Poles were really good at being nobility and really good at being peasants, but not much good at the in betweens, the mercantile stuff in between. The Germans were really good at that, and so the Poles were were the aristocracy. They had a lot of intelligentsia as well, but the Germans ran the shop. They were the shopkeepers of the country up until World War II.
Right.
And there's a restaurant right off the main square in Krakow, which again it was the capital of Poland from around 900, and when it first identified itself as some sort of a principality until I think the mid 1500s. Then that's when the capital was moved to Warsaw, and in order to have a more central location for what was then the Polish kingdom, and um, and um, in the in the I lost my train of thought.
Well, that's okay. So basically, I think what we're looking at here is that you're there with your wife and your
Yeah,
daughter,
right,
and you really some really good information there about the Germans and the Poles and how they've been working together
right.
the last 1,000, 2,000 years, however long.
Yeah, 1,000.
And
Oh, I know. I was going to say there's a restaurant right off the square,
there's a restaurant,
oldest
right?
restaurant in Eastern Europe. It's been
Okay.
in continuous operation since something like 1350 or
Oh,
something.
wow.
And
Wow.
it's allegedly I've eaten there. It's a wonderful restaurant, and allegedly it's been owned by the same German family ever since it was opened.
Oh, wow.
So
Wow.
the history is really amazing when you get into the details.
Yeah. Well,
But
quite the lineage there.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 Anyway, so the story you were talking about, which perhaps is appropriate today because of your reminder to me a few minutes ago that the liberation of Auschwitz was just was
Was
one
yesterday. Yeah.
yesterday
Yeah.
in 1945.
Yeah.
So 60 71 years ago
Right.
yesterday,
Right. Yeah.
and uh, this what occurred to me was we had taken a train to from Gdansk to Warsaw. We got off the train in Warsaw just to grab a sandwich for lunch, and we're going to get back on. The trains run quite frequently. I think like every hour, going from Gdansk to Krakow to Warsaw, and then Warsaw to Krakow. So we got on another train headed south to Krakow. Each train ride is around 3.5 to 4 hours duration. And Warsaw is approximately the geographic center of the country. And and so in this particular situation, we were about 10 minutes out of Warsaw, and we were in a compartment on the train with just the three of us, uh, and I began having an experience. I began seeing what are referred to as phosphenes, which are stars like when you cough or sneeze, a real hard sneeze, might see some stars
Hmm.
in your visual field, even if your eyes are closed. And and I was seeing these in the absence of a trigger like a cough or a sneeze, and I realized from previous experiences that it was likely I was getting ready to go into some sort of altered state. I had no idea what was bringing it on, but I'd had experiences along those lines before that was the sort of leading sign for. So I excused myself uh, from a wife and child and went out into the hallway of the train so I could experience this without and explore what was going on with it. And as was usual for me in that context, my consciousness first was taken out of my body up above the earth, and I was above the earth, uh, looking down from quite a distance, maybe a couple hundred miles or maybe more, and you could see the whole earth. And there's a in my visual field there's a grid up there that's a looks like a grid of made up of the what you see on a digital watch face, with the numbers uh, lighted up. And
Yeah.
except this would be sort of triangular shapes that would be in this grid and so forth.
Hmm.
And I was
Feels like a
above the
little bit
grid.
like sacred geometry, kind of like that idea, or
Well, but
just more like a
not yeah,
matrix.
yeah, just a sort of a matrix around the Earth with with triangular shaped uh, uh, a triangular shaped grid. I was on the outside of it looking in,
Right.
and if past was a giving me insight, then I was going to this grid was going to just start to disintegrate, which it did. I was going to drop down into some other reality than the one I'd been in before. That's exactly what happened. That
Yeah.
I the
As
grid
a
started.
hey, Tom, as a point of clarity, I just want to just mention
Hmm?
right here. So when you're out in the hallway and you're like coming up out of your body, do you feel your consciousness coming up like through your crown, or do you just feel a window open? Was there a point where you really felt you were going up and
Well,
expanding?
in this situation, it's a little bit unusual because it's not like you're in a place where you can completely get off to yourself. You know,
Right,
I'm in the hallway of a train with occasional people walking by and so
right,
forth.
right. Yeah,
And so and having to so I had one aspect of me that was going up, another aspect of me that was keeping visual on what was going on around me as
yeah.
well
That's
by
helpful to hear.
necessity.
Yeah, yeah.
But at least by being right there, I wasn't going to be subject to having to change a diaper or engage in conversation. You know,
Right.
that was the best I could do in the circumstances.
Yeah, that was a good move on your part.
And so anyway, uh, I was I was so that aspect of me that was pulled out of my body um, was up above the earth, of seeing the grid and so forth. The grid starts to disintegrate, and then I start to descend. And as I descended, not knowing where I was going to land, um, as I got closer and closer to the ground, I realized I was already on a train, but I was on something that was vibrating a whole lot more, with a lot noisier than the train I was already on. It turned out it was another train, and that train uh, was I was in a boxcar. Say my consciousness was in a boxcar, and it connected to a child, a boy, about 11 or 12 years old, and I essentially merged with his consciousness, and it turned out over I know we have a limited time for this program, but it turned out that that I had entered the consciousness of a child who was a Jewish orphan um, in the time of World War II, and this was the spring of 1943, and as best I could determine, it was the last train out of the Warsaw Ghetto. Um, and in about March of April of 1943, when they closed the ghetto due to the Polish uprising, and um, and the and there were I had and so I spent several hours exploring the consciousness of that child, exploring the life of that child as best I could, um, and and he had been an orphan since birth. His uh, his mother had been Jewish. His father had run off before he was born because he was a gypsy, and the gypsies might have been the only group in Poland that were more reviled than the Jews, and they were not even accepted by the Jews. And so that's why he didn't hang around for the birth, and the mother died in childbirth. And the boy's name was Moshe, which is the Yiddish name for Moses. And so anyway, I spent hours exploring that lifetime. It was a very uh, powerful emotional experience, as you can imagine. And
Yes.
he was in this crowded boxcar, just jam packed with people. It was the dead of night. The car had been traveling, and it probably going 25, 30 miles an hour. So instead of being a 3.5 or 4 hour trip it is today, it would have been a 7 or 8 hour trip, and it left around dark, and it was cold, and everybody was huddled together. But I say huddled together, everybody was jam packed in there, so huddled together by necessity, but also huddled together to keep as warm as they could. And there was, of course, all this Gestapo talk about being taken to the quote new land and so forth and so on, which was a bunch of BS. But um,
So you're having
anyway,
this
this
experience. I was just going to say, you're having this experience. Your consciousness is in this little boy's, you're inside of this young man, this little boy, 11, 12 years old, and just also you're anchored, back in this other time reality. You're sort of anchored there.
right,
So you're having this interesting experience, but you're really localized with him in that place.
correct,
And you're
yeah,
seeing, and you're able to, feel and see into his own memories of his own lifetime.
exactly, exactly, and yeah, and seeing um, that he had been in an orphanage and having a stable life until the the siege until the Nazis invaded Poland, and then that all ended at the end of '39, early '40, when the Warsaw Ghetto was established by the Nazis, and um, and the and so he had been in the ghetto since its formation, and had been where he had been in an orphanage with a school and so forth before. He just was a street person, scavenging and so forth throughout the 4 years in the ghetto, and well, 3.5 years, um, and uh, and so anyway, it was an interesting, and there was a lot as one of the things that was interesting about it, which was that he went through that period in the ghetto without almost without ever having any verbal communication with anyone else, um, and because it had no regular place to sleep and no I was just living by his wits, from moment to moment, seeing many people get beaten and killed by the Gestapo. And so it was a very powerful uh, experience, and
Yeah.
uh,
It's,
and
yeah,
it's
very
not
powerful
not
experience.
not unlike what we're seeing today from the from the folks at ICE, in terms, except it was constant. It wasn't something they come in, stay a few weeks and go away.
Right, right. So can we go into a little bit about, thank you for that. It's really quite extraordinary, this time travel experience you're having, because really what happens is there is this time travel that you're having, and there's also a really great healing, like a soul retrieval taking place. And I was wondering if you could touch on that a little bit, the soul retrieval and what happens there, and then what happens moving
Okay.
forward. Yeah.
Well, I'll the
Because this is something I think we can teach people about what you can do with your meditation and your mind,
right,
is you
right,
can really travel back to certain places and
right,
begin having these experiences where you're going into a healing experience. You're
right.
going up and yeah. So,
Um, One thing I would say, one of the triggers for the experience, I believe, was the fact that I was in a train on the same tracks,
right,
or the
right.
same pathway that train had gone through in 1943. Um, and it was almost the same time of year. It was not it was first I thought it was 51 years, almost, within a few days of the same time, and so it was almost like this anniversary of the closure of Auschwitz, or the liberation of Auschwitz by the Soviets.
Yes.
Um, but anyway, um, when when the when the train eventually ended up reaching the destination, um, and uh, um, and and stopped, and we were simply in the train without knowing where we were or what was going to happen next. And and the and we were there for at least a couple of 3 hours before daylight came. When daylight came, or the dawn, or just after dawn, the Gestapo showed up, and well, probably the SS, and opened up the train and got everybody out. There were many cars on the train, and all the passengers were lined up, um, and uh, and those who looked like they were able-bodied uh, uh, for slave labor were sent off in one direction, and the old and the infirm and the young people who didn't look like they were strong enough to be slave laborers were left behind, and then they were marched off into a place where they were going to be told. We were told they were going to be deloused, have showers and cleaned up and so forth. And so we first went into an ante room. It's a large room where we were told to strip everything off and get naked, take it, put up clothes in a pile and so forth, and then we were after that was completed, we were sent into another room for the so-called showers, um, and then after we were in there, the doors were locked behind us, and vapor started coming out of the ceiling, and I knew, of course, what this was about, but it was very clear that the child Moshe knew instantaneously that we were being killed, and that um, and as soon as that realization uh, occurred, uh, he left his body, and um, and um, then realized that most of the people in the room did not know that's what was going on. They were people. Eventually, people were starting to fall away from the vapors of the
Right.
of the
Yeah.
Zyklon B, the poison that was coming through the shower heads, um, and so we first saw that the souls were there, but the people were still not knowing that they were dying, and so the first thing he was was wanting to do was try to help get those souls out of there, to help them know that they were dying and help them move on to the next level. And then as that realization came upon him, he realized that he looked around and saw that the place was literally jam packed with thousands upon thousands of souls who had died in that chamber, who had not, even at that moment, did not realize that they had died. They were stuck there as
Right.
ghosts.
Yeah, it's almost
And
like at this point, just to jump in for a moment, this is like the point where I feel in your story, the narrative that I read, where he becomes a helper, right? He becomes a helper bringing these souls out. Is that,
exactly.
yes.
It was at that moment, um, at that moment he was at the soul level, operating at the soul level,
Mhm.
not at the 11-year-old child level.
Mhm.
And 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 there was a there was a moment of realization that was just overpowering, really, for him and me, that this was what his life purpose was: to save those souls in that gas chamber, get them out of
Right.
there. And so he started, and that is something from guidance from spirit that is almost impossible to accomplish if you are completely devoid of a physical connection. If you're a helper angel, you can't make the connection because those people are still aligned with the physical plane enough that they need they need another spirit that's connected with the physical plane as well. And so um, that so what happened next was, excuse me, get a little water here.
Sure, sure. Take your time. It's quite, I'll just say while you're taking a sip, it's really quite a story. It's really all the things, the tragic story, but then there's what I feel is happening here is there's a beautiful moment where it's helping the souls come
Oh yeah,
cross
and
over. Yeah.
that's what happened. He became like the Pied Piper,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Pied Piper of Hamlet, except the Pied Piper, you have a sort of a negative twist of the Pied Piper leading all the children
Right,
off
right.
because the town wouldn't hire him to get rid of the rats.
Right.
And but in this case, Moshe started rounding up the souls in that room, in that chamber, and leading them towards what my friend Bob Monroe referred to as the reception center, or what in common parlance, at least in the Christian tradition, would be referred to as heaven. And literally made a number of different trips, 3 or 4 trips, back and forth, leading this chain of thousands of souls out of that gas chamber until every straggler was taken out of there.
Right.
And and it was a uh, it was one of the most powerful experiences of my life, and I
Sure.
know it
Yeah.
was I know it was the most powerful experience of the child's life for
Yeah.
sure.
So I'll just tie this into a little bit. Moshe, wow, what a beautiful spirit. A young man, young boy, 11 or 12 years old, knowing that that was his part of his destiny to
Hmm.
do this work. And then you're having this memory on this train ride in this sort of alternate
Right,
reality, alternate space-time dimension. And then you begin to have the knowing that this was you.
right, exactly. I mean, as it occurred, I I didn't know for certain whether I was tapping into a lifetime that had been a past life of my own, or whether it had been a life just because I was maybe I picked up the spirit of the place because I have a, I'm sensitive to things and so forth. Um, and so I've for many years have worked with various channels and so forth, and um, and I and I I've checked with 2 different ones, or maybe 3 on this particular event to see whether I got confirmation that this was a lifetime of my own soul, or whether it was one that I just tapped into inadvertently. Um, and and the information that I got was that in fact it was mine, and it made sense because it, it was from the time I was a small child. I had a lot of affinity for Judaism and for Jewish people and so forth. That was it was not part of the culture in which I was born into in this lifetime, and I, when I was just 9 or 10 years old, I experimented a few times going to the Jewish synagogue, which is right down the street from the Episcopal church that I grew up going to in Richmond, and so it was it felt just as natural as the Christian church. As a church, none of them felt all that natural, but
Right. Right,
but
exactly.
but in any event, I felt perfectly at home there, and I had uh, uh, I developed Jewish friends at a young age when my family didn't even know any Jewish people hardly.
Yeah.
And when I was a small child, I was I had an aversion to taking showers, when I was a young boy,
Yeah.
which was inexplicable
Yeah.
at the time.
I
Um,
want to mention to you, just I'm going to pop in for a moment and just let you know that I keep seeing a picture of Anne Frank coming into my mind's eye, which I wanted to mention right here. I think it's a good time if that's okay,
mhm.
because that's exactly what's happened. There's been a big research study with Dr. Walter Semke, and I know you know Walter.
I do. I
He's
mean, he passed
transitioned.
away, unfortunately, but
Yeah, he's passed away,
yeah.
but I wanted to mention that that was one of his bigger reincarnation studies that he brought forth about her time in, her
Yeah.
passing. And then in this lifetime, they've found her, and she
Wow.
herself too
Right.
I think she lives in Canada somewhere. I don't, there's a
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
story out there. Yeah.
Right.
Just really wanted to mention that to you because that energy just came right in as we were talking.
Right.
So,
Right. Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So, it's been interesting because this story began, and one of the things I was curious about was in terms of seeking guidance from channeling, was was this was this child's ability to liberate these souls from the gas chamber, um, and rescue them in effect. Was this something the child knew how to do in its own right, or was it something that I brought with me to him because I knew how to do it based on my contacts with Bob and Roe, because Bob and Roe discovered this in the 1980s and made it one of his uh, major focuses
Right.
with the Monroe Institute was soul rescue.
Right.
And so when I took that up with the channeling source, what I got was that the child already knew how to do that at the soul level from previous experience in other lifetimes.
Right.
And so that was why. So my help, if the child had not known, I could have brought it to the child from this lifetime to that one,
Right.
and from 1994 to 1943, but 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 it wasn't necessary. And although it didn't hurt to have two consciousnesses on board for the experience,
Mhm.
because and it almost felt like a joint effort, uh, even though it was hard to distinguish one from the other, but there was some level of distinction. He didn't know who I was, of course, but he knew that someone was help there that was experiencing it with him and helping
So I wanted to ask you, this is really beautiful, all that you're sharing here, because it really is an extraordinary story that you're sharing. I wanted to ask you when, after you've gone through this, you're seeing through Moshe's point of view, you're seeing all this play out, and you're having this sort of what I call a holographic healing taking place, soul retrieval, all the things that you've been talking about. How did you come back online into Tom into 1994? Like, did time dilate there and then you come back in, or how did that come back in into Christina and Victoria? How did that occur?
Well, I stayed with this thing until the end of the train ride. Yeah, a few times, about once an hour, uh, Christina would come out and say, "Are you all right?" And I say, "Yeah, I'm working on something of myself here." And she knew she was very as a person with a PhD in physical biochemistry and a separate master's in pharmacology. Um, she was uh, uh, she was totally enmeshed in the in the materialist physicalist point of view, and so I didn't want to distract myself because if I had told her what was going on, she would have just said, "Are you having another one of your crazy hallucinations? You really need to go to see a psychiatrist to get some help for that." And so and, and so I kept it to myself,
Yeah.
and at the end of the train ride, though, um, I was able to separate myself from it, uh, and 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 the and frankly, all of the the full scope of the soul rescue part did not come through in that first session. It a part of it did, but it was more or less more like a sort of a glimmer of it. Um, and I then had a follow up experience. In fact, I asked her. I didn't even know where Auschwitz was at that point in time, and I said, "Is Auschwitz somewhere near to Krakow?" And she said, "Yeah, it's just about 25, 30 minutes away." And I said, "Well, I need to go on a tour there tomorrow. Would you like to come?" And she declined. She said, "No, as a Polish school child, every school child in Poland since World War II has had to go there." And she said, both of my grandfathers were interned there. She was not Jewish, but Krakow, Auschwitz was um, originally designed to house Jewish, not Jewish, but Polish intellectuals and people of influence in the society. It was not for Jews at all, and it was all, and so both her one grandfather was a doctor and the other one was an engineer, I think, and they were both there. The her paternal grandfather was tortured to death there, and her maternal grandfather survived, but apparently was a broken man for the rest of his life. And so, um,
Yeah, I was gonna just, I think I want to stop and pin. I want to have another talk with you if that's okay.
that's fine.
About because I want to, I think we're running into maybe 30 minutes. I'm not sure what the time
Yeah,
is
yeah.
here, but what I want to mention here is the extraordinary event that this is. I just want to really highlight that to our listeners that you're having this beautiful holographic healing, the soul retrieval, an alternate dimension. You're anchored enough in 1994 to travel to 1943 and to
Mhm.
have this beautiful understanding at a bird's eye view, we'll call it that, of
Right.
what this young boy went through, what you've really calibrated in this lifetime that that was you and that experience of that
Yeah,
time.
and I was both seeing him from I was within his it was this as this I was within his mind, his head,
Right,
seeing through his eyes, and
right.
also able to see from around him as well.
Right.
It was,
And that's an important piece. That thank you for mentioning that because anybody who wants to begin working with this kind of
mhm.
soul retrieval, holographic healing, time travel, you think about time travel, you can just think about, 2 years ago, and that's a way to go back into the past and like where you were,
Right.
what you were doing, and so this is a really great experience that you're unpacking here to help our listeners investigate some of this information, investigate your information and
Mhm.
your journey. Bob Monroe, you've talked about Bob Monroe, and of course the ions as well. But we're going to go ahead and wrap up. And what I want to ask you here toward the end is, what is the main message that might be helpful coming from that aspect, Moshe, you, and what kind of tips you can give to people who are interested in this work and want to get just some helpful tips.
Well, I
That's a
think
lot.
it's a lot, but I would say this. I think this is the birthright of all of us, and uh, as I'm sure you are just as well aware from your own practice, um, the way these experiences, which give all sorts of meaning and depth to our lives that otherwise we would not be aware of,
Mhm.
the way these experiences are enhanced is by allowing space for them and not marginalizing them, not denying their invalidity just because they're not purely physical.
Right.
And so of course our society, our culture, it trains us to do all those things. It trains us to say this is not real and so forth and so on. But these experiences, um, in my own judgment, can add a huge amount of texture and depth and to our lives, and interesting enough, I've connected through the years since this happened with more than one person who has had the experience of past life as members of the Gestapo, of the SS, whose primary business was to torture and kill Jews in World War II, and it is there's no sense of of hostility or antipathy. These people, some of these people, depending on the soul age, I'm sure to a great extent, some of these people feel like they didn't quite finish the job and they want to continue it. But but the ones that I've encountered, the ones that are sensitive enough to be aware of the experiences of their own past life in that other framework, um, are just as sensitized by their experiences of it as we are who were in that role the victim, because there's it's often said um, that people who are subjected to torture and abuse and so forth, that there is a relationship with the torturer that's flip sides of the same coin, that nobody experiences that from the soul perspective except as a volunteer.
Right.
And so having these kinds of experiences, I think, can open one's mind and one's eyes and one's consciousness and one's heart to the fact that we all are volunteers in everything we do and everything we experience, and that uh, at the at the heart of the matter, we really are all part of one single consciousness, looking at itself from a great variety of different
Yeah.
perspectives and directions.
Right. That's well said and so beautiful, Tom. You're just a great speaker, a great teacher, a great experiencer of consciousness, and you're bringing this information forward. I really think it's going to help people who watch this either now or in the future. And I'm really so grateful that you've said yes to coming on and sharing this particular
I'm delighted.
story.
If you
Yeah.
want me to invite me back to finish off this story and others, I'll
Yes.
be glad to do it.
Yeah, there's more to the story. Yeah, and I really think it's helpful for people to understand what you said there at the end about the birthright, allowing space for people to explore this through conversation or through channeling or through whatever it might be.
Yeah, just
Um,
give themselves permission
Give themselves
for these.
permission.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, because right.
well, I
Yeah.
mean, in my own case, as I mentioned, my mother was treated most of her adult life for schizophrenia. My father was a psychiatrist who had gone into psychiatry because of so much schizophrenia in his own family, and he didn't realize he was marrying one who would be in the
Right.
same category.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so I, from a soul perspective, I think that I chose that that milieu, them as my parents, and I
Mhm.
firmly believe that we do choose our parents and the family we're going to be born into for the experiences it offers us. I also was given guidance to that effect when I was complaining about my lineage one time at age 10, and I was given very firm instruction by my spirit guides that this was nothing to complain about. I'd chosen them, and stop griping about it. And, um,
Yes, take responsibility and stop
right,
complaining, right?
exactly. It was really one of the most. It was one of the most empowering messages I was ever given.
Yeah.
Um, but uh, but I think that you know I was aware from the time I was very young that they didn't have a place to put any of my these kinds of experiences on my part. Well, I was not. I did not make the mistake of sharing any of these things with them,
Mhm.
lest they uh, label me as crazy,
Right.
and I think that a lot of people who are
Mhm.
labeled crazy or just having experiences that are not do not fall within the bandwidth of our very limited perspective.
Right. I agree with you wholeheartedly about that. And, I just wanted to mention here at the end of our talk that, so Republicans die and come back as Democrats, and Democrats can die and come back as Republicans,
Right, right, right.
And, we keep changing these roles from, time and space. So people can connect with you through the IONS website. It's www.richmondions.org. We'll put that in the description box for if you guys want to connect to Tom. He
Right.
speaks once a year. He brings in amazing speakers from all over the world to the this chapter that's been going on for 30 years now. He just celebrated a 30-year anniversary of the Richmond IONS. I think that's really beautiful. It's changed my life to be in your presence and to have all these great speakers that you've brought in. So thank you so much. We'll have you on again very soon. Maybe make this every couple of months or something like that,
Love to
whatever
do
feels
it.
good.
Love to do it.
And really share your experiences and all the things that you can really sort of coalesce together and say, hey, look, it's okay to know this. It's okay to be part of this, this study of consciousness and how we're using our intuition to heal. So thank you for this timeline healing. I really appreciate you, my brother Tom, and I'll see you very soon.
Thank you, Ruth. Appreciate it.